My name is K.H. Low Carter, and 6 weeks ago I was just a broke piano teacher in a cramped apartment, counting tips to make rent and praying my car would start in the morning. My world was small and predictable until a phone call in the middle of the night tore it apart. My grandfather, Henry Carter, the billionaire the world worshipped and the only person who had ever truly believed in me, had been killed in a car crash. A drunk driver hit his car. He died at the scene. By the next morning, his lawyer had summoned the family. I walked into that office expecting a formality, maybe a token inheritance. Instead, I heard words that changed everything. My grandfather had left me everything, roughly $7 billion. The silence hit first, thick and heavy, then the room detonated. My mother's eyes flared with outrage, my father's face went purple. Ethan, my brother, slammed his fist on the table. "That money belongs to us," they shouted. I said one word that sealed my fate. No, that night they threw me out of their house. By dawn, I was at the gates of my grandfather's mansion, key in hand, with a duffel bag on my shoulder and nowhere else to go, completely unaware of who and what was waiting for me on the other side. Before that night, my life had been anything but glamorous. I wasn't rich, powerful, or notable. I was just K.H. Low, 26, teaching scales and beginner pieces at a tiny music studio downtown. My days were full of sticky fingers hitting wrong notes, tentative renditions of Twinkle, Twinkle, and the occasional prodigy whose hands blurred over the keys like they were born there. My paychecks barely covered rent on my noisy, aging apartment, groceries, and the gas for my second-hand car that rattled ominously every time I merged onto the highway. But I wasn't miserable. I loved the way a child's whole face lit up when they got through their first song without stopping. I loved the late evenings when the studio was quiet and I could practice alone until my neighbors banged on the wall in protest. There was a kind of quiet joy in that small life. My parents never saw it that way. To them, success meant glass towers, luxury cars, invitations to the right galas. My job teaching music was an embarrassment, another mark against the daughter who hadn't lived up to the Carter name. I had always felt like an outsider in my own family. My father, Richard Carter, was obsessed with climbing corporate ladders. If he wasn't working, he was talking about work. The few times he spoke to me, it was mostly to criticize my choices, my career, my lack of ambition, as he called it. My mother, Diane, was consumed with appearances. Her life revolved around charity luncheons, manicures, and staying in the orbit of the rich and influential. Asking how I was doing never made it onto her schedule. Ethan, my older brother, was the golden child, spoiled, impulsive, constantly forgiven. Every mess he made was either ignored or spun as youthful experimentation. The only person who ever made me feel like I was enough exactly as I was Grandpa Henry. His mansion wasn't just a symbol of wealth to me, it was refuge. As a kid, I used to sprint down those marble hallways, not caring about the priceless paintings or the antique vases, only about the way his warm laughter echoed behind me. On Sundays, he'd sit at the grand piano beside me, his fingers still quick despite the arthritis creeping into his joints. "K.H. Low," he would murmur, leaning closer, "money can buy you a piano, but it can't buy you music. That comes from here." He'd tap my chest right over my racing heart. Those lessons were about more than music. He taught me that wealth was a tool, never an identity. While my parents flaunted everything they had, he lived with an almost stubborn simplicity. He drove the same black sedan for years, wore suits older than I was, and never cared who was watching. I spent more weekends there than at my own house. We baked cookies in the cavernous kitchen, played chess in front of the fireplace, walked the garden while he pointed out roses he'd planted with his own hands. He listened when I talked about my dreams, really listened. He didn't roll his eyes or change the subject. He just smiled and asked questions. Sometimes I caught him watching me with a thoughtful look, as if he saw something in me no one else did. Once, when my parents were furious that I'd chosen to stay with him instead of going on a family cruise, my mother's smile had frozen like cracked porcelain. He'd noticed. That night, as we washed dishes together, he said quietly, "One day, K.H. Low, you'll understand why I've kept you close." I thought it just meant he loved me. I didn't realize it was also a warning. It happened on a Tuesday night. I was at my little kitchen table, grading practice sheets, the building creaking around me the way old buildings do. An unknown number flashed across my phone screen. I almost ignored it, then something in my gut said, "Answer." "Miss Carter," a man's voice said, heavy and formal. "This is Officer Daniels with the State Highway Patrol." I'm sorry to inform you that your grandfather, Henry Carter, was in a collision tonight. His car was struck by a drunk driver. He didn't make it. The words didn't make sense at first. My pen slipped from my hand, ink blooming across the paper like a spreading bruise. Didn't make it. My chest constricted, my brain refusing to process. My grandfather wasn't supposed to die. He was a constant, eternal. He was supposed to be at my student's recital next month. He was supposed to call me tomorrow to ask if I'd eaten. He couldn't be gone, but he was. The funeral ran together in my memory, a blur of black clothes, murmured condolences, and numbness. The mansion, once my sanctuary, turned into a stage. My parents took charge, of course. Not out of grief, out of pride. They barked orders at the funeral director about floral arrangements. Snapped at caterers because the hors d'oeuvres weren't up to standard. My mother clutched her pearls and hissed to a friend loud enough for 3 rows to hear. Can you believe he still drove himself? A billionaire, and he insisted on acting like an ordinary man. My father stood rigid, his jaw tight. His eyes weren't swollen from crying, they were sharp and calculating. You could almost see the numbers turning in his head. Assets, accounts, stocks, real estate. Ethan leaned against a marble column, scrolling his phone, sighing like the whole thing was an inconvenience. You okay? I asked quietly. He barely glanced up. I'll be better once we know what we're getting. I wanted to scream. We were standing a few feet from my grandfather's coffin, and all they could talk about was money. Instead, I stepped closer to the casket, to the man lying so still he looked like he might sit up and complain about the tie they'd put on him. His hands were folded over his chest. His face was peaceful. I'll make you proud, Grandpa, I whispered so only he could hear. I promise. When I looked around the room, it hit me that I might be the only one who felt that way. Relatives who barely visited posed for photos with tear-streaked faces, then dropped the act the second the cameras lowered. My parents shook hands, accepted condolences, played their part. Their expressions tightened every time someone mentioned Grandpa's fortune. When the service ended, I lingered until almost everyone was gone. The house, the piano, the rose garden, they all felt haunted now, not in a supernatural way, just empty. For the first time, I felt truly, terrifyingly alone. 2 weeks later, my phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen was familiar, Michael Turner. K.H. Lowe, my grandfather's lawyer said, his voice calm and measured. Your grandfather's will is ready to be read. He requested your presence and the presence of your immediate family, tomorrow at 9, my office. Something in his tone made my stomach knot. I didn't know it yet, but that meeting would rearrange my entire life. The next morning, I stood outside Michael Turner's office, an old Victorian house converted into a law firm. Dark wood, stained glass, and tall windows cast with gray light from the clouded sky. My fingers were slick on the handle of my umbrella, even though it wasn't raining. Inside, the air smelled like old books and coffee. Michael greeted me with a subdued smile. His silver hair was precisely combed, his suit immaculate. K.H. Lowe, he said, taking my hand. Your grandfather spoke of you often. He was very proud of you. My throat tightened. Thank you, I managed. Before I could say more, the door banged open. My parents swept in as though they owned the building. My father snapped at the cuff of his expensive watch. My mother's heels cracked sharply against the hardwood like small gunshots. Ethan slouched behind them wearing sunglasses, at 9 in the morning, shirt half-tucked, smirk firmly in place. Let's get this over with, my father said brusquely. We all know how this goes. My father built the empire. As his only son, I'll be taking over. Michael's polite expression didn't change, but I saw something, tension, anticipation, flash in his eyes. He led us into a conference room where a long oak table sat gleaming under soft lights. My parents immediately claimed the seats at the head of the table. Ethan sprawled sideways in a chair, sneakers propped on the edge. I sat near Michael, wishing I could disappear. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and opened a thick leather folder. Before I begin, he said, I want to state for the record that Henry Carter was of sound mind when he updated his will last year. He underwent cognitive evaluations, all documented, and I personally oversaw every signing. There is no question regarding his mental capacity. My father waved an impatient hand. Yes, yes. Just read it. Michael lowered his gaze to the paper and began. I, Henry Carter, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my final will and testament. To my beloved granddaughter, K.H. Lowe Carter, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all financial assets, real estate, investments, and holdings. Currently valued at approximately $7 billion, the words crashed over me like a wave. 7 billion to me, I must have misheard. I stared at Michael, waiting for him to correct himself to say he'd made a mistake. He didn't. The room exploded. What? My father shot to his feet so fast his chair toppled. His face turned red, veins bulging at his temples. That's absurd. He would never cut me out. Never. My mother clutched the table as if the wood itself might hold her up. 7 billion to a girl who teaches piano, she snapped. She doesn't know the first thing about managing money. Ethan ripped off his sunglasses and slammed his palm against the table. Where's my portion? I need capital for my startup. He promised he'd back my next venture. Michael raised a steady hand. Mr. Carter anticipated this response. He made it crystal clear that this decision was intentional. He specifically stated that his son and daughter-in-law had been well provided for during his lifetime and that he wished his entire fortune to pass solely to K.H. Lowe. My father's hands shook. Lies. You manipulated him, K.H. Lowe, didn't you? He spat my name like an accusation, whispered in his ear while he was weak and confused. Tears stung my eyes. No, I said, voice breaking. I didn't even know he changed his will. I never asked him for anything. Michael reached for a small remote and pressed a button. A screen on the wall flickered to life. My grandfather appeared, sitting in his favorite leather chair, hands folded, his expression steady. My heart clenched. If you're watching this, he said, it means I've passed. His gaze flicked slightly as if he were looking at us through the camera. Richard, Diane, Ethan. I love you as family, but I can no longer ignore what you've become. Greed has blinded you. You see me as a wallet, not as a father or grandfather. K.H. Lowe is different. She comes to see me, not what I can give her. She lives with integrity. She will carry my legacy with dignity. My mother gasped. Ethan cursed under his breath. My father snarled at the screen. This is manipulation, he shouted. He wasn't thinking clearly. Michael shut off the video and spoke over the chaos. The will is legally binding. Contesting it would be costly, and given the documentation your father left, almost certainly unsuccessful. The way my father looked at me in that moment chilled me to the bone. This isn't over, K.H. Lowe, he said, voice low and lethal. You think you can defy us, you will regret it. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind. She will carry my legacy with dignity. $7 billion wasn't just money. It was a test, a weight, and I knew, standing in that conference room, that my own family would do everything in their power to rip it out of my hands. That evening my phone buzzed. Come home. 6 p.m. We'll settle this as a family. No question mark. No please, just an order like always. I almost ignored it. The thought of going back into that house made my stomach twist, but some naive part of me hoped they might have cooled down, that maybe grief had warped their reactions. I went. The house was unusually quiet. The living room, usually reserved for my mother's cocktail parties, had the cold stillness of a boardroom. My father stood by the fireplace, a tumbler of scotch in hand. My mother perched on the edge of a pristine white chair, eyes like chips of glass. Ethan lounged on the sofa with his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Sit, my father ordered. I did, folding my hands tightly to hide their shaking. He took a sip of scotch and set the glass down with deliberate care. You know what needs to happen, he said evenly. Sign the estate over to me. I'll manage it the way it should be managed. In exchange, you'll receive a very generous allowance, 10%. More money than you could ever spend. 10%, I repeated, stunned. That's over $700 million. My mother's voice slid in, smooth and coaxing. Think about it, K.H. Lowe. That's enough to buy a mansion of your own, enough to live like a queen for the rest of your life. You don't need the stress of all that responsibility. Let your father handle it. Ethan snapped his laptop shut. 700 million is more than enough for you. I need the rest for my company. Grandpa wanted me to succeed. Don't be selfish, the word sliced through me. Selfish, I whispered. Grandpa chose me precisely because I wasn't like this. Because I didn't treat him like an ATM. My father's face hardened. He stepped closer, looming over me. This isn't about choice, it's about loyalty to your family. His tone turned icy. Either you sign or you walk out that door with nothing. No support, no family, do you understand? My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the ticking clock. I thought of Grandpa's lessons. Of his quiet, steady belief in me. Of his insistence that money was only a tool, never the point. I lifted my chin. No, the word landed like a slap. My mother shot to her feet, her voice shrill. You ungrateful brat, after everything we've done for you, private schools, lessons, a roof over your head, and you dare do this to us. Ethan sneered. Enjoy being rich and alone. You'll come crawling back once you realize money can't hug you at night. But it was my father who delivered the final blow. His voice dropped to a cold, dangerous whisper. If you walk out of this house tonight without signing those papers, you are no longer my daughter. Don't come back, don't call, don't expect anything from us. You'll be dead to this family. For a second, everything inside me crumpled. I wanted to beg him to take it back, to say he didn't mean it. But another part of me, the part my grandfather had quietly built over years, held firm. I think I've been dead to you for a long time, I said softly. You never really saw me. Only what I was. His expression twisted with fury. He grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the hall. My mother followed, barking orders like a general. Pack a bag, 30 minutes. After that, the locks are changed. I stumbled into my childhood bedroom. The posters on the walls were faded, the old piano trophies collecting dust. It felt like stepping into a museum of someone I used to be. With shaking hands, I threw clothes into a duffel. I took my passport, my grandmother's quilt. A framed photo of me and Grandpa at the piano. Everywhere I looked, ghosts stared back. The girl who tried so hard to earn their love, the grandparents who had given it freely. When I stepped back into the hall, my father was waiting with his arms crossed and eyes like ice. He opened the front door. Out. The night air was cold and sharp as I stepped onto the porch. The duffel cut into my shoulder. You'll regret this, K.H. Lowe, my mother called after me. Money won't keep you warm, family is forever. I turned to face her, my eyes burning but my voice steady. Then why did you just throw me away? The door slammed like a gunshot. Just like that, I was homeless, but not powerless. In my coat pocket, my fingers closed around a small brass key engraved with my grandfather's initials, the key to his mansion, the last place that had ever felt like home. If my parents thought they could strip me of everything, they'd forgotten who put that key in my hand. This was only the beginning. The drive to the estate felt longer than it was. My old sedan rattled down the dark road, headlights slicing through low-hanging mist. My bag sat on the passenger seat, but I barely noticed it. All my attention was fixed on the key clenched in my fist. He'd given it to me almost a year before, pressing the cool metal into my palm with a conspiratorial smile. Someday you might need this, K.H. Lowe. I'd laughed then, thinking he was being dramatic. Now I understood. The iron gates appeared out of the darkness, tall and imposing, the Carter family crest glinting faintly in the headlights. For a moment I just sat there, hands frozen on the wheel. Could I really go in without him there? Would the mansion feel like a mausoleum instead of a sanctuary? Then I heard my father's words in my head, "You are no longer my daughter." I had nowhere else to go. I got out, walked to the gate, and slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. The iron groaned as the gates swung open. The driveway wound through old oaks, their branches arching overhead like guardians. As I drove up, the mansion slowly came into view, its windows glowing softly. It looked awake. I parked in the circular drive and climbed the stone steps. My hand shook as I fit the second key into the front door. The lock released with a familiar click. The first thing that hit me was the smell, lemon polish and cedarwood, the same scent that had greeted me on 100 childhood visits. The grand foyer stretched out, marble floors gleaming beneath the chandelier. My footsteps echoed across the emptiness. For half a second, I almost saw him at the top of the sweeping staircase, smiling down and asking why I was late for Sunday dinner. But the house was silent. "Miss K.H. Lowe," I jumped, nearly losing hold of my bag. A tall man stepped from the shadows, silver threaded through his hair, dressed in a neat, understated uniform. Recognition flooded me. "Robert," my voice cracked. "Robert Hayes," he nodded, a faint, kind smile softening his lined face. "Yes, miss, I've been with Mr. Carter for over 25 years. And now, his gaze warmed, "I suppose I'm with you." Emotion rushed up so suddenly it almost knocked me over. "I thought everyone would be gone," I admitted. "I thought I'd be alone," Robert shook his head. "Mr. Carter anticipated trouble." The word landed heavily. "He told me, if anything happens to me, you look after K.H. Lowe." "She is the true heir," Robert straightened slightly. "He left very clear instructions." Of course he had. Robert led me into the study where a fire already crackled in the hearth. "I've been keeping the house running," he explained. "Your grandfather insisted it stay ready at all times. He said one day you might need sanctuary here." I sank into one of the leather chairs, letting the heat soak the cold from my skin. For the first time that night, the tight band around my chest loosened a little. "What happens now, Robert?" I asked. "My family, they won't let this go. They've already threatened me." His expression darkened. "They were here once after the funeral, tried to take jewelry, documents. I stopped them, but Mr. Carter knew they'd try again. That's why he put so many things in place. He glanced toward the door. "You'll see tomorrow. Tomorrow, Mr. Turner is coming," Robert said. "There are files, recordings, and letters from your grandfather. He built a wall of protection around you, Miss K.H. But you'll have to stand your ground." I wrapped my grandmother's quilt around myself. The house hummed quietly, the grandfather clock in the hall, the faint crackle from the fire, the soft whir of security cameras I'd never noticed before. For the first time since the will reading, something stronger than fear stirred in my chest. Resolve. If my family wanted a fight, they wouldn't just be facing me. This mansion wasn't only a home. It was a fortress, a legacy, and I would defend it. That night I slept in the guest room I'd always used as a child. Fresh sheets, curtains drawn, the same paperback I'd left on the nightstand months ago with a bookmark still tucked in the middle. It felt as if my grandfather had been quietly preparing for me to come back, not as a guest but as someone who belonged. I woke to the sound of voices downstairs, a low murmur. For a panicked second I thought my family had already arrived. I grabbed my phone and edged to the landing. Robert stood at the open front door, speaking with a familiar man holding a briefcase. "Miss K.H. Robert called up gently when he saw me. "It's Mr. Turner." Relief washed through me. I made my way down. Michael stepped inside, shaking off the chill. His face was serious, but there was something almost fatherly in his expression as he looked around. Clearly, he'd been in this house many times. "Your grandfather entrusted me with more than his will," he said, setting his briefcase on the dining table. "He entrusted me with helping you." We went into the study, now bright with morning light spilling across the mahogany desk. Michael opened his case and took out a thick envelope sealed with my grandfather's initials. "He wrote you letters," he explained. "Instructions, advice." Warnings. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside were several neatly typed pages, each signed in the familiar, precise script I knew so well. "K.H. the first letter began. "If you're reading this, then I am gone. I know your father and mother will come for you. Do not give in. I have prepared for this moment." Tears blurred the words, but I forced myself to keep reading. "You will not stand alone. I have gathered people who care about you, people who will protect you when blood turns against you. Trust them as you have trusted me." As if on cue, there was a knock. Robert appeared with a woman in her 50s wearing a simple cardigan and holding a thick folder. "This is Dorothy Reynolds," Michael said, "your grandfather's housekeeper for over 20 years. She's family whether she shares your name or not." Dorothy's face crumpled as she pulled me into a hug. "Oh, K.H. she murmured, pulling back to look at me. "You look just like your mother did when she was your age, before greed hardened her. Your grandfather adored you." She set the folder on the desk and opened it. "These are your grandmother's journals," she said. "She documented everything, every visit, every request your father made, every small kindness you offered. Henry wanted you to have proof of why he made his decision." I flipped one open. My grandmother's looping handwriting stretched across yellowed pages. "Richard came again today, asking for more money. When we said no, he called us stingy and left in a rage. K.H. came later with soup. She stayed until Henry's fever broke." Each entry cut and comforted at once, a record of my parents' constant demands and of the quiet, simple ways I'd tried to be there. Before the weight of that could fully settle, another knock sounded. Robert introduced a tall woman with sharp eyes and a laptop bag. "This is Rosa Martinez," Michael said, "your grandfather's business partner. She knows Alexander logistics inside and out." Rosa gave me a firm handshake. "Your grandfather left detailed instructions," she said. "He wanted you to understand not just the size of the fortune, but the company behind it, the people whose livelihoods depend on it. This isn't just money, K.H. It's an entire ecosystem." She flipped open her laptop and showed me charts, spreadsheets, and reports. "There are hundreds of employees," she continued. "He trusted you to protect them, to uphold the ethics he lived by." The realization hit me hard. I wasn't inheriting a pile of money. I was inheriting responsibility for lives I'd never even met. By midday, more of my grandfather's trusted circle had arrived. There was George Patel, the investment advisor who had managed his portfolio for decades. He brought thick binders full of records, every trade, every holding, all transparent and meticulously organized. Carlos Ramirez, the estate manager, came next. He had overseen the grounds and maintenance for years. He showed us security footage from the new cameras my grandfather had installed after beginning to suspect my father. And then Judge David Harrison stepped in, a tall man with deep lines around his eyes and a presence that filled the room. He shook my hand solemnly. Your grandfather asked me to act as a neutral witness if anything went wrong, he said. I promised him I would not allow his wishes to be twisted. I intend to honor that promise. The room buzzed with movement, papers passed back and forth, files opened, legal phrases clarified. For hours, they laid out everything my grandfather had carefully set in motion. Every clause, every safeguard, it all formed a net, quietly woven, designed to catch me if my own family pushed me off the edge. When the last binder snapped shut, I sat back, exhausted and overwhelmed. He knew, I whispered, he knew exactly what they would do. Michael's hand came to rest over mine. Yes, he said. And he believed you could stand up to them. Robert squared his shoulders. Your father already tried to strip this house, he reminded me. He stole jewelry, searched for documents. He won't stop. He'll come back, and next time he'll bring lawyers and backup. He met my eyes, but this time you'll be ready. I looked around the room at the faces turned toward me. None of them were related to me by blood, but in that moment, they felt closer than my own parents had in years. If they want to come for me, I said, standing despite the shaking in my knees, let them, I'm not running. I won't hand over what Grandpa entrusted to me. Dorothy squeezed my fingers. That's our girl, she said softly. He would be so proud. That night I lay in the master bedroom, his room staring up at the carved wooden beams. For the first time I fully understood what I'd inherited, not just wealth, not just a title, a legacy and the duty to guard it, and deep in my gut I knew tomorrow would be the real beginning. The next morning the air felt heavy, charged like the sky before a storm. Robert stood near the front door, posture rigid, as if he were posted on guard duty. In the kitchen, Dorothy moved with swift efficiency, baking as if muffins could soften the coming collision. By 9, the house was fully awake. Michael had spread documents across the dining table, key clauses highlighted. Rosa had her laptop connected to a monitor, financial charts and company reports ready to display at a moment's notice. Judge Harrison sat near the fireplace, calm but formidable. I stood in the center of it all, my heart thudding in my chest. They're coming, I murmured. Almost on cue, the crunch of tires on gravel cut through the quiet, multiple engines. Through the window, I could see sleek, expensive cars sliding into the driveway like predators circling prey. The pounding on the front door shook the chandelier. Open up, K.H. Lowe, my father's voice boomed. You've had your fun, this ends now. Robert looked at me, waiting. I forced my lungs to fill with air and nodded. He opened the door. My family swept in like a storm. My father led, face red, jaw clenched. My mother glided just behind him, lips tight, eyes full of contempt. Ethan trailed, posture lazy, gaze sharp and hungry. This is still our house, my father barked. You have no right to lock us out. I held my ground, even as my knees threatened to buckle. Grandpa left this house and everything else to me, legally, morally. In every way that matters, Ethan snorted. Don't act innocent, you played him. Everyone knows a multi-billion-dollar empire should stay with the family, not land in the lap of some broke piano teacher. Michael rose from his chair, holding a folder. Actually, he said evenly, Henry Carter anticipated those exact accusations. He left written statements and video recordings clarifying that K.H. Lowe is of sound character and that his decision was deliberate. Contesting the will would be pointless. My father snatched the folder from his hands, flipping through the pages with jerky movements. Fabricated garbage, he spat. You really think any judge will take this over the word of his only son? That, a deep voice cut in. Depends on which judge you're talking about. Every head turned as Judge Harrison stepped forward. And unfortunately for you, Richard, he continued bluntly, I am one of them. Your father asked me personally to oversee any disputes. The documentation is airtight. You won't win this in court. For a split second, fear flashed across my father's face, then anger buried it. He jabbed a trembling finger at me. You ungrateful little brat, he hissed. You are tearing this family apart. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. No, I said quietly. You did that a long time ago when you chose money over love. My mother's composure cracked. After everything we gave you, she shrieked. Private school piano lessons, vacations, you repay us by stealing $7 billion from your own blood. That money belongs to the Carters, not just you. Actually, Mrs. Carter, Dorothy said gently, appearing with a small box in her hands, your daughter belongs here more than anyone. She handed the box to Michael, who opened it and withdrew one of my grandmother's journal pages. Your mother-in-law recorded everything, Dorothy said. Every visit, every demand, every kindness. They explain why Henry made his choice. Michael adjusted his glasses and read aloud. Richard demanded more money again today. When we refused, he accused us of being stingy and stormed out. K.H. Lowe came later with soup. She stayed until Henry's fever finally broke. The only sound in the room was the fire popping in the grate. Ethan snapped. He shoved away from the table and slammed both palms down on the wood. "Enough with these stupid journals," he shouted. "K.H. Lowe just signed the transfer. I need capital for my new platform. Grandpa wanted me to succeed." Rose's voice sliced cleanly through the air. "He already gave you chances, Ethan. One failed venture after another, each more reckless than the last. Your grandfather said no in the end because you never earned what you asked for." Color flooded Ethan's cheeks. He rounded on me. "You think you're better than me now. You'll choke under the pressure. You'll come begging for help. Just watch." I stood up a little straighter, feeling something solid settle beneath my fear. "No, Ethan," I said. "For the first time in my life, I'm not the one begging." My father exploded. He swept his arm across the table, sending papers flying. Contracts, records, legal notices all scattered across the floor. "This is all meaningless," he roared. "None of it changes the truth. That fortune is mine by right." "By right," Judge Harrison's voice thundered back. "Your father's will is the only right that matters here. You have no legal claim." None. As if he'd been waiting for this exact moment, Robert stepped forward, holding a small USB drive. "Mr. Carter had me install new security cameras last year," he said calmly. "They caught something you should probably see." Michael plugged the drive into Rose's laptop. The screen on the wall lit up. There they were, my father, my mother, Ethan caught on video just days after the funeral, rifling through drawers, pocketing jewelry, stuffing documents into bags. My mother sucked in a sharp breath. That's out of context." "Context won't matter much," another voice said coolly. We all turned. The chief of police stood near the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. I hadn't even noticed him arrive. "Theft is theft," he said, "particularly from a deceased man's estate. You're already dangerously close to criminal charges." For the first time, my father truly faltered. His shoulders sank, his bluster seemed to drain away. My mother's hands shook. Ethan swore under his breath and took a step back from the screen as if distance could change what we were all seeing. I seized the silence. "I'm done being afraid of you," I said, my voice clearer than I felt. "Grandpa trusted me. You can threaten, scream, or steal, but you will not take his legacy from me." For a beat, nothing moved. Then my father's voice came, low and poisonous. "If you keep down this path, K.H. Lowe, you are no longer part of this family." I met his gaze. "You made that choice the moment you tried to destroy me." They left in a fury. The mansion seemed to exhale with each pair of footsteps receding down the hall, each car engine roaring to life and fading down the drive. I stood there, chest heaving, knees trembling. Michael's hand found my shoulder. "You held your ground," he said quietly. "He'd be proud of you." For the first time, I believed that. After they left, the house felt eerily quiet, no shouting. No slammed doors, just the steady tick of the grandfather clock and the soft crackle of the fire in the study. I stared at the front door they'd just walked through. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow, scraped out. Whatever tiny hope I'd clung to that they might one day choose me over money was gone. Then, somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard my grandfather's voice. "Stand your ground, K.H. Lowe. Dignity can't be taken from you. You can only give it away." And I realized I hadn't given it away. The days that followed blurred into a marathon of meetings and decisions. Michael walked me through legal documents, explaining each one until I could almost recite the key clauses myself. Rosa took me into conference rooms and onto video calls, teaching me how Alexander Logistics actually functioned, who the senior staff were. What those lines on the charts meant for real people's jobs. George met with me regularly, breaking down investments into terms I could understand. Dorothy kept the household running like a perfectly tuned engine. Robert remained a constant, solid presence just down the hall or a room away whenever I needed him. For the first time in my life, people were turning to me for answers. It was terrifying. It was also incredible. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just the other Carter child. I was the one holding my grandfather's legacy in my hands. My phone didn't stay quiet, of course. My parents and Ethan called and texted ceaselessly. "We'll sue you until you're broke. We're still your family, K.H. Lowe. Surely you'll share. Think about everything we sacrificed for you." Sometimes the messages were threats, sometimes guilt trips, sometimes fake sweetness. I stopped reading them. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I poured myself into what mattered, honoring my grandfather the way he would have wanted. 3 months later, we launched the Henry Carter Foundation for Education and Community. $2 billion committed to scholarships, school programs, and local initiatives. I stood on a small stage, a banner with my grandfather's name rippling above me in the breeze. Beyond the podium, I saw students, teachers, community organizers all waiting. My hands shook as I adjusted the microphone. "This isn't just about money," I said, scanning their faces. "It's about a legacy." My grandfather believed in integrity, in hard work, in giving people a chance when no one else would. Today, with this foundation, we're continuing that work. Applause rose up like a wave. For once, I didn't shrink from it. I let it wash over me, grounding myself in the fact that something good, something real was beginning here. Life at the mansion slowly shifted. The echoing hallways that had once felt too big and too empty began to fill with warmth. On Sundays, I started hosting dinners, not for my blood relatives, but for the people Grandpa had trusted. Michael, Rosa, Dorothy, Robert, sometimes senior employees and their families. We gathered around the long oak table that had once belonged to him, passing dishes, telling stories, laughing too loudly. Dorothy teased me mercilessly about my burnt dinner rolls. Rosa taught me how to fold empanadas properly. Robert told impossible-sounding stories about my grandfather's stubbornness in his early business days. To everyone's astonishment, Michael turned out to be a surprisingly skilled pianist, entertaining us after dessert. It was messy, it was noisy, it was imperfect, and it was mine. One crisp autumn morning, I drove alone to the cemetery. The trees had turned gold and red, leaves drifting down to form a soft carpet beneath my feet. I carried a bouquet of white lilies, his favorite, and knelt by the headstone. Henry Carter, 1935-2023, a legacy of integrity. For a long while, I just sat there, fingers tracing the carved letters. "Hi, Grandpa," I whispered eventually. My voice wobbled. "I hope you can see me. I hope I'm making you proud." The wind whispered through the branches overhead. I took a deep breath. "I'm trying my best," I said. "The foundation is up and running. We're helping kids, hundreds of them. Some will be the first in their families to go to college. Your employees are okay. The company is strong. I think I finally understand. It was never really about the billions, was it? It was about what you could do with them, about building instead of breaking. About helping instead of taking." Tears blurred my vision, but I smiled anyway. "I promise I'll keep carrying that forward," I said. "I won't let your name or your trust be wasted." A sudden gust swept through the cemetery, sending leaves spiraling around me. For a brief moment, it felt like an answer. That night, I sat at the grand piano in the mansion's music room. My hands moved over the keys, muscle memory guiding them more than thought. Peace settled slowly over me, note by note. Yes, my blood family had turned their backs on me. Yes, they'd tried to bully and threaten and shame me into surrender, but I hadn't broken. In their absence, I'd built something new, a family by choice, a mission that stretched beyond my own comfort. A life anchored in the values one man had quietly taught me over countless Sunday afternoons. The true inheritance was never the $7 billion sitting in accounts or invested in companies. It was the flame he'd lit in me, the resolve to live with integrity, to protect those who depended on his legacy, to use what I'd been given for something that mattered. He had been more than a billionaire. He'd been my mentor, my safe place, my hero, my grandfather. As the last chord rang through the house, echoing off marble and wood in memory, I let my hands fall still and bowed my head. "I'll never let you down, Grandpa," I whispered into the quiet. "Not ever."